challenges for Indonesia in terms of building a digital government, from your perspective?
So, you know, I think we're at a moment in the development of digital approaches to governance, where not just creating efficiencies in terms of data and digital, but actually figuring out use cases where one can advance AI for the social good, or digital technology for the social good, will be essential. And as I see it, I think the role that artificial intelligence and machine learning can play in that will be significant in the proper context and in the proper use cases. That being said, I do think that it will be essential to have an approach that prioritizes responsible and trustworthy digital technology. So that, for instance, prioritizes end-to-end transparency and accountability in the way these systems are developed, and in general, the way that the way that innovation projects within the public sector context are run. And so there are a tremendous amount of opportunities, but I would just stress that those components will be essential.
So for Dr. Matthew, you are a senior lecturer in Newcastle University. Can you tell me your experience about the implementation of AI in your education sector, and what's your plan about the cooperation in Indonesian education institution?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. I'm seeing AI have a couple of impacts. One, I think, is a challenge to the way that we assess student work so far. We've seen the likes of ChatGPT emerge as very, very helpful assistive technologies that do perhaps challenge the way that we've assessed software engineering programs and things in the past. It's a set of tools that are changing very much what it means to be a software developer and someone working in the AI space. So I think there's some adaptation and some learning that we need to do there. I see particularly great opportunities in AI-based approaches to provide tailored learning at the pace for particular learners, but never replacing the role of the educator. I always see learning as a very human-mediated process, and the role of AI being an assistant, but only part of that. On the other side of my role, so at the Alan Turing Institute, I think one thing I'm very, very keen on is to recognise very different cultural approaches around education and around the needs of workforces in the UK and in Indonesia. And one thing that we do to try and bring the community together is we have a community of data science educators. These are people maybe in core disciplines like computer science and statistics, but also people wanting to teach applied skills out in just about any vertical segment you can think of. Really to embrace those differences in how people learn, the challenges that are faced in different education systems, and what we can do to support. The sorts of things we've done to support in the past have been around creating open source curriculum materials, recognising that throughout the education sector there's a lot of duplication of effort and people creating multiple instances of the same training. But if we take a very careful view towards developing and sharing material in the long term, then there are really interesting ways we can collaborate.
Okay. How about the cooperation for developing AI research to Indonesia? Something like AI technology transfer to Indonesia, from UK to Indonesia. Well,
that's great, and I really do think this couple of days of programme, a very, very interesting programme where we'll hear from academic and government colleagues, as well as heading out on site visits to a couple of big AI infrastructures, will be a really helpful starting point. I think what's already very clear to me in the AI strategy for Indonesia that was presented this morning is I think the UK and Indonesia are facing particular challenges in quite the same way around how do we develop our labour market to keep pace with AI developments, and I can see some big opportunities for us to do that collaboratively.
So regarding the institute itself, You already touched several issues, but what I want to ask is, what are your works and advice mostly about for the government of United Kingdom or for other governments around the globe?
So I think in terms of my direct work, I've been, most heavily engaged with UK government around informing curriculum standards and developing data science and AI professionals as a distinct role. I think this event is, for me, a really interesting opportunity to begin exploring that from an international perspective, and certainly Indonesia is a very sort of a priority market for me because of the the potentials and that alignment that I alluded to.
Professor David, do you want to add some?
Sure. I mean, I think that for me, the starting point is participation-centered development and deployment of these systems. And so I think a learning that from our work at the Institute that is really transferable is that responsible and trustworthy innovation in AI is citizen-driven and mission-led innovation. And so starting out on the journey at the right point, right, where you're building social license and public consent into how you're approaching the technology, that's crucial. And I think over the past few years at the Institute, we have really seen, not just in the UK, but across the globe, because we've engaged many different countries from all different parts of the world in our research. But we've seen how important it is to center participation, really understand the equity issues that are involved when these systems are being developed, to really think about issues of access. So how it may well be that in certain regions and certain localities there are barriers to access which really need to be taken into account when you're starting on that innovation journey for whatever technology that's being built is. So yeah, I would just say from a big picture perspective on the research and work that's done at the Institute, prioritizing that sort of citizen-centered or participant-centered way of working is important.
It's interesting because you are mentioning about trustworthy, and also this is like a social-driven mechanism or environment. So what kind of skill those ordinary people should able to have to face this changing, we are transformed into AI environment and ecosystem? Right.
So I'll start the answer and then I'll turn over to Matt, who's really focused on this. But I think first and foremost, we really need to think about data and digital literacy, and the importance of having an upskilled citizenry and across impacted communities, where the fundamentals of what data is, what data science is, how do we understand the term artificial intelligence, which I think is very heavily disputed in general, but even more so, ensuring that citizens writ large across are not being coaxed into having a hyped up version of what the technology is, right? That building an understanding among impacted communities that these are ultimately computational systems that are based on mathematics and statistics, rather than alien agents that are going to come and take over the world, right? So from a big picture perspective, I think it's very important to have an upskilled citizenry that has that sort of what we would say is a deflationary starting point, a starting point that's grounded in evidence and kind of real world understanding.
I'm afraid this has to be the last question. So yeah, Matt, please continue.
I was mostly going to echo what David said, so if anybody wants to get a last question in, please do.
So I just want to follow up. What kind of culture right now, from your observation, people around the globe, even in the UK or outside UK, what's the behavior and the culture against these artificial intelligence?
I think in a UK context it's quite a mixed message. Some large-scale surveys of the UK population have shown people are very positive around the use of AI within business for the sorts of efficiency reasons that David has outlined, but also there is a very great appreciation and a concern around the threat of what that means for people's roles. So it's a mixed message. I think really I echo that point around data literacy, being able to very critically evaluate the limitations as well as the potentials of these approaches, to be informed and able to foresight the implication that these technologies are going to have down the line in their roles, and then hopefully we as the National Institute can have some training and upskilling interventions in there ready to support these individuals in their development.
So literacy is the key point for us.
I think it's literacy, it's critical thinking. It's that sort of deep analysis and not taking things for face value, to see through the hype, to make sure that decisions are being informed in the right sort of way.
And if I just quickly would add something to this, and that's responding to this question about how the public in general in Indonesia and the UK are sort of being carried along at this moment of the technology. I think it's really important to make a distinction between the ways in which AI is marketed from the perspective of big tech companies and others that are trying to boost excitement about the technology. So distinguish between that and actually what's going on with the technology, because there will be a tendency for the public who they're receiving so much information about AI through the media and through social media and other networks that isn't necessarily accurate about what the technology is actually doing and what the character of the technology is. And so I would say it's going to be extremely important to, as Matt was saying, to have a kind of critical thinking perspective that's built among the members of the public who are at the end of the day receivers, but also kind of critical receivers of information.
Thank you.
I have one question. There's 62 business which would adopt AI technology in Indonesia. Now, also Indonesia lean economy to small and medium enterprise. How would you see its potential for cooperation in Indonesia?
For SMEs, for the small and medium size.
For small and medium size.
I think as a general observation in the UK, it's been the small and the medium enterprises that have required the greatest level of support in terms of helping them identify their maturity in terms of their use of data, in terms of cultural readiness around AI. We're doing work with the UK government developing skills frameworks and assessment tools for that, and I could see in the future there being the potential for that to be portable to Indonesia and to have that sort of benefit here as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.